everyone. Anyone else getting like flashbacks when you hear that music? It's always like, oh yes, we're getting started. Okay, I can see. Okay, the mood is a little bit down. We're going to talk about the GitHub Copilot today. I'm actually going to quickly introduce myself before we get started. And before I introduce myself, one short PSA. If you hear like a whistling noise, like rattling, breathing or something, don't worry. It's not Darth Vader coming to join us. It's just me. I'm having a little bit of a cold. So just bear with me. Okay. Wow, no laughs. Tough crowd. Everyone like hangry, waiting for lunch? Okay, I'll try to hurry, I promise. Yes, who am I? Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm like 30 something. I never tell how old I am. I am a great lover of backend and DevOps. And yeah, I'm also an AI enthusiast and a GitHub Copilot power user for the past 2 years. And just some fun facts about me. I once met Emma Watson in New York City. So if you want to hear that story, hit me up after. And I'm obsessed with gummy bears. And because it's the season, guys, there's already decorations outside. I love Christmas cookies. So if you want to talk about like any of these topics as well, just hit me up after for lunch or whatever. We'll build a group. We'll have like a community table. We'll connect. We'll love each other. It's gonna be great. Okay, so let's get started. What is the Copilot? And we're going to take one step even further back. Before we start about the Copilot, what are LLMs? So, like we've all talked about large language models. I just want to do a quick recap with you guys. So these are like the foundation. Whenever you use AI, ChatGPT, something you feel like is super smart, it has an LLM underneath. So what is it? It's basically a huge black box where a lot of people put like a lot of data into it and they're like, we have all this stuff, try to make sense of it. Don't tell us how you work, but then spit out really cool sounding smart stuff so we can believe you're actually self-aware and you're super smart. This is not how AI actually works. AI doesn't understand code. It doesn't really fully understand language. It recognizes patterns. So it's a predictive model that makes assumption about what is most likely to come next, which is very important. So remember, AI is not self-aware. It's not smart. It's a predictive model. So the Copilot. This is the thing that I've promised in my intro text that I would do. I had a lot of sessions with the GitHub Copilot. We're like besties. We're like this. And I thought, for this session, I'm going to ask the Copilot, hey, what are you actually really good at? And I thought, he's going to do like this really grandiose speech, like, oh my God, I'm like the master of whatever. No, he didn't. He just said, you know what, I'm like good with coding stuff. If you want to do like a code review, if you have questions, if you just, anything code related. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to poke him a little bit more and be like, dude, what are you really good at? Like, come on, tell me, give me a little bit more. Unfortunately, same response. So, yeah. But what is the Copilot actually? It's your new LLM BFF. So, you truly never really have to code alone ever again. But, it's not like a real coworker. Sometimes I get lonely when I code and I'm like, oh yeah, let's, talk about the newest Christmas cookie trends and stuff. And then the Copilot is like, well, I'm not really here to assist you with that. But if you have like any coding language that is common that you want to talk about, we can. And I've not tried it out on like anything crazy like Malboge, Whitespace. So, I mean, if you point it into the right kind of like documentation space, maybe it's able to help you with that, but stick with the most common coding languages. Okay, so the Copilot and me, we had this, two-year relationship. Started out with like honeymoon phase. I remember when I was in the test pilot for my company and I was like, oh my God, this is freaking amazing. This person is anticipating everything I want to do, all the variable names, and it's just, oh. And then after about like 4 or 5 months, I had to do my first refactor and it was like, oh, okay, honeymoon phase is over. So, we did like a little relationship recap, how you do every year. So we did it in the summertime. And I was like, okay, let's look at what is going good and what is going not so well. And, I'm a positive person, so I always like to start with the positive stuff. So here are like my learnings, what the Copilot is actually really good at. So I like to think of the Copilot as the intern that I don't have. We've all been somewhere like, oh, I need to write this really amazing, awesome bash script. Or, hey, I get to do front end today. Yes. Um, I don't want to. Can I outsource this? Yes, you can. To your best intern in the world, there's just a few things that you have to keep in mind when you're talking to the intern. The intern will do exactly what you would like it to do. So I, had it generate a very small bash script here, be like, hey, just, give me an echo every few seconds, say you're like the best person in the world. And it did exactly that. Maybe you're noticing it's not having an end to this infinity loop that I've created because it was unclear in my instructions. So if you have these very simple tasks, maybe like 50 lines of code, and you're like, oh, I don't feel like it today, go for it, do it. But, I always say, like any good intern, never ever leave the Copilot alone and be very, very clear in your instructions. Also, don't expect it to be like the best code you will get in your life. Because like we said, the AI is not self-aware. It doesn't know about like coding principles. It's just like, okay, you want to do this. Here's like a solution, that I'm proposing. It might not be, including design patterns. I might create 50 classes to do that one thing that you would like, but it works. Okay. What is the Copilot also really good at? It's good at being kind of like an assistant teacher. So my team and I, we got really lucky. Last year, I was allowed to switch from Java to Kotlin. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, yes, finally doing something new and cool and hip. And, whenever you start a new language, you're like, okay, I know how I'm doing it in Java like this. What is it like in Kotlin? Is there like a new concept? Or what is that coroutine thing again that I've learned about? And, it's like having your own personal like lookup person. You're like, oh, hey, can you just quickly explain to me how I'm doing this and that? And then the Copilot is like, yeah, sure, you can do it like this. And you're like, oh, this is great. Thank you. So no more scrolling through Stack Overflow for, hours and hours to find that one little thing, or trying to find that one line you've been reading in the documentation, but for the life of you, you cannot find again. Okay, last thing. What the Copilot is also really good at. This is one of my favorite things. It's really good at finding the easy stuff that we tend to overlook. I don't know if you know this, but humans are actually able to read words if the first and the last letter are correct and everything else in between can be mumbo jumbo. Your brain will just fix that for you. Thank you, brain. Really cool feature. But in certain cases like this could also be a bug. So this is actually a real life code example from about 2 weeks ago. And I was like, okay, I'm putting together this cool bash script. I'm doing like CI/CD. I'm running it on GitHub. And I'm like, why is this not working? Why is it constantly telling me the input file doesn't exist? And I'm like, come on, this should work. It's perfect, right? And usually that's the kind of spot when you're like, okay, let's make the code more complex. Let's add 50 million different logs and make it very difficult. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm just going to ask the Copilot. And Copilot was like, oh, by the way, Lisa, you missed a T. If you add that in there, you're going to be fine. Funny thing is, I was actually pairing with 2 other colleagues, and they also didn't notice. And, this can be a great time saver. So I remember in a time before AI, maybe some of you remember that, before AI, I had a copy-paste mistake from a colleague, and we were like 4 devs looking at it for half an hour. Okay, 4 devs, half an hour, that's 2 hours of, lifetime we're never going to get back. And it was like, oh, you forgot to rename your variable. And he was like, oh, shoot, yeah. Thank you for that one. So that's, something really great that the Copilot can do, save you that lifetime, looking for stuff that you tend to overlook. Okay, I already gave a little bit of a preview. I love the Copilot. We're like this. But like any good relationship, we do have our ups and downs. So let's look at some of the stuff that's been hard between the two of us, me and the Copilot, in the past 2 years. Yeah, refactoring. So, I was working in this team, and I had a bunch of Spanish colleagues, and they're like, okay, let's, refactor all of this. And I was like, okay, yeah, you guys do that. And they were like, by the way, we have a public holiday tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool, I'll take over from you tomorrow. And before I tell you the rest of the story, let's quickly remember how LLMs work. They're predictive models. Okay, so whenever they look at stuff, they're like, the thing that is most likely to come next now should be this. And the stuff it's been trained on also includes fun stuff like Stack Overflow. We've talked about Stack Overflow. You guys remember Stack Overflow? I'm trying to get somebody, if you remember Stack Overflow, raise your hand. Ah, yes. Ah, great. You remember the quality on Stack Overflow you sometimes find? Yes. So this is also stuff that you can get from the Copilot. And the problem is, like I said, the Copilot is not self-aware. It doesn't understand logic. It doesn't really understand your business code. It doesn't really know what you're doing. So it just kind of refactors on what it thinks stuff should look like. Which, can be fine, or it could also not be so fine when it, for example, also includes data stuff. So whenever you're working with data, be aware that the Copilot is a predictive model and it doesn't understand what your values are. So if you have like static values in your code because, I don't know, you have like a time zone offset thingy, or you have that magic number in your company that you like to use everywhere, these are things the Copilot doesn't understand. And yeah, continuing on the story that I was telling about my Spanish colleagues, they did this refactoring of a test class. And that test class had a test file in it that basically just had numbers in it. We got it from our PO. He was like, okay, your code, this is the input, this is the other input, this should come out. Everything easy peasy. And, my colleague said, like, okay, we'll refactor the code. And for some weird reason, the Copilot also decided it was a good idea to refactor the input. I still cannot tell you why I thought that a 7 should be an 8, plus should be a minus, and some weird business logic should be changed entirely. But it was Friday, I was alone. I had this really lovely refactoring code left. And it took me 3 hours to fully understand what was going on. I was like, okay, so you changed the code. Funny thing is, my colleagues actually refactored the test classes. Some of them were failing. And then instead of fixing the test, they fixed the business logic, or so they thought, because they didn't realize that some of the variables got changed. And so, it took me a solid 3 hours to first find out, okay, which values have been changed, then what does the test actually do, and then what business logic was changed, and what should I change it back to. So, yeah. Fun times. Like I said, good relationships have their ups and downs. Okay, then, another thing that's kind of along the same lines of data stuff is that the Copilot is not really good with anything that's enum-like. Maybe if you heard of this really cool feature that the Copilot, like any good LLM, can have hallucinations. If you've not heard of it, is whenever, any kind of LLM is making up stuff that it thinks that should be there but are not. It's like, in my predictive nature, I feel like this value should exist. Like, we should have caramel popcorn at the code.talks. Sounds like a great idea. Everyone is up for it. And then you come to the code.talks, and all of a sudden it's just like sweet popcorn, not even salty. And you're like, but like the Copilot promised me this. And this also happens, especially with enum values. Something where I've seen it a lot is with Terraform code. If you don't know what Terraform is, it's an infrastructure as code language. It basically allows you to describe any of your resources, and then it will create API calls in the background and then just deploy the stuff for you. And it's like, big love, very big love. And because it's generating API calls in the background, and APIs have very specific specifications that you need to follow, you also have to be very aware of what attributes are you using, what values can you set for these attributes. And, sometimes I would be chatting with a Copilot, like, hey, I want to change this resource. I want to, have this option. Is there something available? And then the Copilot is like, yeah, totally. Just put in this field and, just run your pipeline. Everything is going to be great. I've done that twice. And then afterwards, I learned to read official documentation. And one of the things where this also happens, where, first it seems fun, and then you kind of realize, maybe this is not like the coolest features, when you're talking about anything that's like role management, permissions, etc. A lot of times I'd be like, okay, I want to do this and this in the pipeline. I have like an account. What permissions should this account have? The most likely answer I usually got from the Copilot was like, oh, just give it the admin, you're going to be fine. Or give it like the super admin. And first of all, maybe the super admin doesn't exist. First, check that. And then second of all, maybe that's not the best solution that, I should pursue. Maybe it's better to create a custom role that has certain permissions that I would like that account to have, and not just give it the almighty power over everything. So when dealing with anything of these kind of things with a Copilot, always, 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 always remember to read documentation, and then also turn on your brain and ask yourself, is this really the best solution that, is out there? Maybe not. Okay, last thing. Um, so maybe like going back a little bit, we talked about LLMs. They're trained on data from the past. One of the things that the past usually is not really good at is predicting the future. So this is a fun story. This is actually a screenshot I got from my colleague, and he allowed me to use it here today. This is only about 2 weeks old, so this is a new feature. And he told me, like, you know what, Lisa, I'm working on this new project, and I, reached out to our service team. I would like to have a new workspace. And, he wrote a ticket for the service team. Service team took some time, got back to him, was like, oh, yeah, sure, we've created your workspace. You can get started. Have fun with it. So he logged into the workspace, and he looked around. He was like, this is weird. I'm missing some features. What is going on? And then, he reached out to the service team. He was like, why did you give me an outdated version? And this is the response he got. So this is German. It basically says like, oh, my bad. Sorry, the Copilot autocomplete set a flag that used explicitly the first version instead of the second version that was the newest. And I feel like this is representative of, something that we sometimes forget. The Copilot is not self-aware, and it's trained on past data. And it's trained on data that might not be the best that you've seen out there. We just talked about Stack Overflow. And it would be really cool if the Copilot could hallucinate new features that are coming up that are not in the data it's been trained on. But unfortunately, it's not able to do that. And this is one of the things where I'm like, okay, we started out having fun. I was talking about like, oh yeah, great relationship, ups and downs. But this can actually really hurt us and my relationship with the Copilot. I've lost a lot of trust in the past few weeks, guys. It's been hard. But this is potential security risk. Why would you use outdated versions? Why would you just use code that maybe popped up 50 times on Stack Overflow, but has been replaced by better solutions, by newer versions, by whatever? So whenever you're working with a Copilot, this is something to be very, very, very aware of. You're dealing with the past. And the models, because the more context they get, the more data that they have to process, the less reliable they get. So, once they start introducing new versions of languages, whatever, the models get more unreliable. So, turn on your thinking brain. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of doomsday talking now, and you're like, oh my God, I was looking forward to lunch, and now Lisa was like the total bummer. I was hoping I'm gonna get a cool currywurst and have like a fun whatever, and now like this. Now what? And like also, what about all the other cool stuff that I've heard about the code talks? You haven't even addressed that. Like, what is going on? So just a quick word on like some of the other things. You might be wondering, okay, yeah, Lisa, but there's like these cool new models out there. You can now use, cool Claude, ChatGPT 55. I don't know. Aren't they better? The answer is maybe. Some of the problems that we've talked about here and that you've seen, they're resulting from the main principles of how LLM works. And each new model works, in similar ways. So, maybe Claude is giving you a better answer in one way, but then it might give you a worse answer in another question. So it doesn't really matter how fancy your coding intern is, it still comes with a bunch of flaws that you have to be aware of. I actually just came out of a talk about agentic coding and agent modes, and I gotta have to say, even though I've seen all the magic, it was really cool, it was really fun, I'm still a little bit concerned. We've seen things that the Copilot does, which is representative of what an agent might do. It might use outdated versions. It might, hallucinate whatever it thinks should be there. And is it really so much faster to read through like 500 lines of generated AI code than to just write it yourself and go to bed with that really good feeling of having done something yourself? I don't know. If you're like doing like, oh, I don't feel like doing front end today, I want to have like a cool website for my friends to look at my vacation pictures, maybe. But would you trust your intern with really important business logic and features that might need to be safe because they're dealing with personalized data? And one of the last things, code reviews. This is actually something I really, really liked lately. So I've been using the Copilot a lot for code reviews. on GitHub because it is able to find these really weird small mistakes that I'm, overlooking. Whenever you're reading code from other people, you're like, oh yeah, this looks nice. And then all of a sudden, the Copilot is like, oh, by the way, you used the wrong path for this integration test. And I'm like, oops, totally overread that. Or, oh, by the way, you have a spelling mistake there. But based on the experience that I had and other colleagues, that's as good as it's going to get for now. So we'll see how it goes in the future. Okay, now you're like, okay, now what? Okay, we've done all of this, and now I'm like, I want to go for lunch. I want to feel good. Yes, don't panic. I still recommend to always use, the Copilot or any other AI that you like to assist you with coding because it does make you better or faster, sometimes smarter. But you always have to be aware of, what it is. It's not your best coding buddy. It's a predictive model, and one of the things that I really want to highlight here is don't be AI slob. Don't be the person that's saying like, oopsies, just, I just used the autocompletion, sorry. Always remember to read your code, read what the AI did, and understand it. And if you don't understand it, ask the AI what the heck it is doing. That's what it's there for, to explain to you. And then my personal favorite, now might be a good time to reread or read or listen to Quality Land for the first time or second time or whatever. Quality Land is a really great book. It's like you can think of it as a fun version of 1984 by Marc-Uwe Kling, the guy who did the Känguru Chroniken, if you maybe heard of that, where AI has basically taken over and it's painting a very interesting picture of the future, but in like a fun way, like it's very like dystopian, but in an entertaining way. So maybe give it a listen. I personally recommend to listen to it. It's available on Spotify now, so yeah, go for that. And if you've listened to that and you're like, man, I feel like I want to learn a little bit more about AI, I've actually created a cool YouTube playlist about AI hot takes. My personal favorite on that playlist is about AI psychosis and how AI can cause, well, not so fun psychological things in people who might not be mentally stable. It's done in a very tasteful way. And also, if you feel more like fun, upbeat, Adam Conover did like a really cool commentary about why OpenAI is probably not likely to save the world. Also, I printed a bunch of stickers, a whole bunch of them. I actually had a chat with ChatGPT about it, how many I should print, and he was like, yeah, let's just go for 500. So I have a whole bunch. So if you want some, come down and see me. Get yourself a sticker or 50 for you and all of your friends. Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you so much for sticking with me before lunch. I hope it was worth your time. And I'm open to also difficult questions, but I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to be the best answer.